today I'm giving you 7 high sugar fruits to avoid if you have diabetes. So if you do have diabetes, you already know it's important that you maintain normal blood sugar levels. And you do so generally by avoiding excess carbohydrates, avoiding excess sugar, and making sure that you have a balanced diet with good amounts of fiber and protein. Now, if you're a diabetic and you do constantly have high blood sugar or hyperglycemia, you know that you can have complications like amputations, heart disease, poor wound healing. And remember, diabetes is the #1 cause of kidney failure. It's the #1 cause for me seeing patients in my dialysis units. Let's go over a couple of definitions. Glycemic index. What in the world is a glycemic index? Well, the glycemic index is a measure that ranks food from a scale of 0 to 100, and it measures how rapidly a particular food causes a rise in your blood sugar. If a food has a low glycemic index, then it is slow to cause your blood sugar to rise. If a food has a high glycemic index, then it causes your blood sugar to rise very quickly. Okay? So yes, the glycemic index measures from 0 to 100, and 100 essentially represents pure glucose. An example of a fruit with a high glycemic index, watermelon. I know I just made every diabetic in America mad, but don't worry, there's more to the story. Watermelon has a glycemic index of about 75, okay? And remember, 100 is the highest. So yes, watermelon can cause a rapid rise in your blood sugar. But then there is another term called glycemic load, which puts more into the calculation. Okay, the glycemic load takes into account not only the glycemic index, but it also takes into account the servings of carbohydrates. So using watermelon as an example. Yes, watermelon has a high glycemic index, but if you calculate how many carbohydrates are in each serving of watermelon, it's actually pretty low. So when you calculate the glycemic load for watermelon, even though that index is high at about 75, the glycemic load is low, much less than 10. And so in order to calculate the glycemic load, you take the glycemic index, you multiply it by the servings of carbohydrates, and you divide it by 100. And so if the glycemic load is 20 or higher, it's considered to be high. If it's between 11 and 19, that's medium, it's moderate. But if the glycemic load is 10 or less, that's considered to be low. So while watermelon has a high glycemic index, it actually has a low glycemic load. I know, it gets complicated, but here's the simple fact of the matter. The glycemic index is still a simple and useful way to rank how fruits affect your blood sugar. In fact, according to the Shanghai Women's Study, of the women who had the highest glycemic indexes in their diets, they were 21% more likely to develop diabetes mellitus type 2 when compared to the women with the lowest glycemic index. So we will be using the term glycemic index as I talk to you about which high sugar fruits to avoid if you have diabetes. #1, overripe bananas. Why are overripe bananas a bad choice if you have diabetes? Because of the starch to sugar conversion dynamics. Okay, overripe bananas have a glycemic index of between 56 and 75. And this is high because remember, the scale for glycemic index is between 0 and 100. And this high glycemic index in overripe bananas is due to hydrolysis into glucose and fructose. And these sugars can send your blood sugars into high spikes, making it very difficult to control your blood sugar. A medium banana has about 14 to 15 grams of sugar and 27 grams of carbohydrates. So yes, it can make diabetes control complicated. But don't worry, don't cry for me, Argentina, because you know I have a healthy alternative. Apples. Yes, yes, yes. Apples. Apples are a good choice because they have a glycemic index of only 36. And here's the key. Apples have high fiber. They have pectin. And we know that fiber helps to slow down the absorption of glucose into your blood. And so if you eat apples, due to their pectin fiber, they can actually help to regulate blood sugars. An apple a day might keep me away. But I doubt it. I'm still here. #2, watermelon. Yes, watermelon does have a high glycemic index of between 75 and 80, and it has about 9 grams of carbohydrates per serving. And so if you eat a lot of watermelon, you really can cause yourself to have high spikes in blood sugar. We discussed earlier that there's some nuance when it comes to watermelon. Yes, watermelon has a high glycemic index, but it also has a low glycemic load of about 5 or 6. And that's because the serving size of the carbohydrate is taken into account. But here's the thing. You have to be careful about that serving size because the serving size of a watermelon is about 1 wedge. How many people eat just 1 wedge when it comes to watermelon? Not me. At any rate, consult with your doctor, your endocrinologist, consult with your registered dietitian, because if you're diabetic, then perhaps you can have some watermelon in moderation and avoid a spike in sugar, but you definitely want to make sure you're not having large amounts of watermelon because the fact remains that it has a high glycemic index and it is a fruit that you want to avoid in large amounts if you have diabetes. So what's your alternative? Here's your alternative. Strawberries. Ripe, strawberries, ripe. Y'all know I love strawberries. It's like the most nutrient-dense fruit we have. Strawberries have a glycemic index of only 40. Plus, they have other health benefits. They have fiber. They have antioxidants. They can actually help to stabilize your blood sugar levels. Strawberries are also loaded with vitamin C and polyphenols, and they can enhance your insulin sensitivity. Number 3, pineapple. It is with a heavy heart that I put pineapples on the list of high sugar foods to avoid if you have diabetes. Now, if you know me, if you've been following me, you know that I love the health benefits of pineapples. They have bromelain, which really has just excellent anti-inflammatory benefits. But the truth of the matter is that pineapples also have a high glycemic index. Even a fresh pineapple has a glycemic index of between 51 and 66 and 16 grams of sugar per cup. And then if you start talking about canned pineapples, okay, especially ones that are canned in sugar, they have a glycemic index of up to 94, and they have 25 grams of sugar per half a cup. Okay, you see where I'm going with this? There's a high glycemic index when it comes to pineapples, especially canned ones, and this can cause a destabilizing of your blood sugar if you have diabetes. I have an alternative for you, oranges. Oranges actually have a relatively low glycemic index of about 40, and oranges are loaded with soluble fiber, which can help to regulate your blood sugar. Number 4, grapes. Ooh, don't be mad at me. I know you love grapes. I do too. But grapes have a high fructose load, plus you can fall into portion pitfalls. So here's the thing with grapes. They have a high glycemic index of about 56, and they have 23 grams of sugar per cup. That's a lot. And because grapes are so tiny and tangy and delicious, you can really get into trouble with portions because you can pop one in your mouth or 10 or 20 or 30. And before you know it, you've really had a huge serving of this high sugar fruit. What's a healthy alternative? Blackberries. Blackberries are an excellent alternative. Okay, first of all, they are also delicious, sweet, tangy, tart. Okay, so they're a pretty good substitute. But very importantly, blackberries have a low glycemic index of between 25 and 30, and they only have 7 grams of sugar per cup. In addition, blackberries are loaded with fiber and antioxidants, and so of course that's good for helping to manage blood glucose control. Blackberries also have anthocyanins, which help to improve endothelial function.